Maya always knew she experienced music differently from everyone else. While other kids in her 6th grade class would bob their heads to songs, Maya would close her eyes and feel something deeper. She couldn't quite explain it, but music moved through her body like waves in an ocean. When her mom played old records in their small apartment, Maya would press her hands against the speakers, feeling every beat, every note vibrating against her skin. Her mom, Rosa, worked 2 jobs to make ends meet, but she always made sure Maya had what she needed. When Maya was 9, Rosa saved up for 3 months to buy her daughter a second-hand keyboard from a pawn shop. It wasn't fancy, and some of the keys stuck, but to Maya it was the most precious thing in the world. She would spend hours after school teaching herself to play, following YouTube tutorials and library books about music theory. There was something magical about the way Maya's fingers moved across those keys. She didn't just play notes, she felt them. Every chord sent vibrations up her arms. Every melody created patterns she could sense in ways her friends couldn't understand. Her music teacher, Mrs. Chen, noticed something special about the quiet girl who always sat in the front row. Maya had a gift, something rare that couldn't be taught. But things started changing when Maya turned 12. At first it was small things. Her mom would call her name from the kitchen and Maya wouldn't respond. The television volume kept creeping higher and higher. In class, she started missing instructions the teacher gave from across the room. Rosa thought maybe her daughter was just distracted, going through that phase all preteens go through. But deep down, a worry was growing. The school nurse noticed it during a routine hearing screening. Maya failed the test. Then she failed it again. The nurse called Rosa at work, her voice gentle but serious. They needed to see a specialist soon. Rosa's heart sank. She knew what this might mean, but she pushed the thought away. Not her daughter. Not her baby girl who loved music more than anything in the world. The appointment was on a Tuesday afternoon. Rosa took the day off from her morning shift at the diner, losing money they couldn't afford to lose. They sat in the audiologist's office, the walls covered with diagrams of ears and charts full of medical terms neither of them understood. Dr. Morrison was kind, with graying hair and patient eyes that had delivered difficult news too many times before. The test took almost 2 hours. Maya sat in a soundproof booth, raising her hand when she heard beeps and tones. With each test, the results grew worse. Dr. Morrison's expression became more serious. Finally, he asked Rosa to step into his private office. Maya waited outside, swinging her legs and playing with the worn strap of her backpack, unaware that her entire world was about to change. When Rosa came out 15 minutes later, her eyes were red and puffy. Maya's stomach dropped. She knew. Somehow she already knew. On the bus ride home, Rosa held her daughter's hand tightly and finally spoke the words. Progressive hearing loss. Genetic condition. No cure. The sounds that Maya could barely hear now would continue to fade until one day, maybe in a few months or a year, there would be only silence. Maya didn't cry at first. She stared out the bus window, watching the city blur past, trying to process what this meant. That night, alone in her room with her keyboard, reality hit her like a punch to the chest. She would never hear music again. Not really. Not the way other people did. All those songs she loved, all those melodies she dreamed of creating, they would be lost to her forever. She put her head down on the keys and sobbed until her body ached. The next few months were the hardest of Maya's life. Every day brought new losses. The sound of rain against her window became quieter. Her favorite songs on the radio turned muddy and unclear. Her mom's voice grew distant, like Rosa was speaking from another room even when she was sitting right next to her. By her 13th birthday, Maya could only hear muffled, distorted sounds. It was like living underwater. School became a nightmare. Kids who used to be her friends didn't know how to talk to her anymore. They would say things and she would smile and nod, pretending to understand when she caught maybe one word in 5. Teachers grew frustrated when she didn't respond to questions she couldn't hear. The special education department tried to help, assigning her an aide who would repeat everything in writing. But it made Maya feel different, isolated, broken. But there was one place where Maya still felt whole. At her keyboard, she discovered that even though she couldn't hear the notes clearly anymore, she could still feel them. The vibrations traveled through the keys, through her fingertips, through her entire body. She learned to play with her eyes closed, relying on muscle memory and the physical sensation of the music. It wasn't the same, but it was something. It kept her connected to the thing she loved most. Mrs. Chen became Maya's lifeline during this time. While other teachers saw a disabled student who needed accommodations, Mrs. Chen saw a musician who was learning a new language. She spent her lunch breaks with Maya, teaching her to read sheet music more carefully, to understand music theory on a deeper level. She showed Maya videos of deaf musicians who had accomplished incredible things. There was a whole world out there, Mrs. Chen explained, of people who experienced music through touch, through sight, through understanding rather than just hearing. Rosa watched her daughter struggle and wished she could take away the pain. She started learning sign language from free classes at the community center. She bought books about deaf culture. She researched schools that specialized in teaching deaf students. Money was tight, but Rosa would do anything for her daughter. She contacted advocacy groups, filled out endless applications for assistance programs, and fought with their insurance company to cover hearing aids that barely helped. Maya's 14th birthday came with a finality she had been dreading. The hearing aids that had given her some muffled connection to sound stopped working. The world went completely silent. She woke up that morning to a house she could no longer hear. No birds chirping outside. No traffic sounds. No music playing from her mom's room. Just nothing. An empty, hollow silence that pressed in from all sides. That night, Rosa found Maya sitting at her keyboard in the dark, not playing, just sitting. She turned on the light and sat beside her daughter. Through tears and sign language they had been practicing together, Rosa told Maya something that would change everything. Music wasn't just something you heard with your ears. Music lived in your heart, in your soul, in your body. Beethoven went deaf and still composed masterpieces. There were drummers, pianists, and violinists performing all over the world who couldn't hear a single note they played. Maya looked at her mother, really looked at her, and saw the fierce determination there. Rosa believed in her. Even when Maya had stopped believing in herself. Slowly, carefully, Maya placed her hands back on the keyboard. She pressed down on middle C and felt the vibration travel through her fingers. Then another note, and another. She couldn't hear them, but she could feel them. And for the first time since the diagnosis, Maya thought maybe, just maybe, she could find a way forward. The piano had been her first love. She wasn't ready to give up on it yet. Maya spent her freshman year at Lincoln High School trying to blend in. It wasn't easy. The school had over 2,000 students, and most days she felt invisible. She had an interpreter who followed her to classes, a woman named Patricia who signed everything the teachers said. Some kids stared. Others whispered. A few made cruel jokes when they thought she wasn't looking. Maya pretended not to notice. But she noticed everything. The only place she felt like herself was in the music room. Mrs. Chen had helped her apply to Lincoln specifically because of their performing arts program. It was one of the best in the state, with a real concert hall and instruments that didn't have broken keys or missing strings. Maya would spend lunch periods there, practicing on the beautiful grand piano that sat center stage. The vibrations from that instrument were unlike anything she had felt before. Rich, full, alive. But everything changed when she transferred to Riverside Academy for her sophomore year. Rosa had fought hard to get Maya accepted there. Riverside was a private performing arts school, the kind of place where kids drove expensive cars and wore designer clothes. They had produced professional musicians, Broadway performers, and even a few famous composers. Getting in was nearly impossible, but Rosa had written letters, made phone calls, and even met with the principal to explain Maya's situation. Finally, they said yes. They would give her a chance. Maya's first day at Riverside was overwhelming. The building looked more like a museum than a school, with marble floors and paintings hanging in gold frames. Students walked through the hallways carrying violin cases and talking about auditions and competitions. Maya felt completely out of place in her thrift store clothes and worn backpack. But when she saw the music department, her breath caught. It was incredible. 3 full practice studios, a professional recording booth, and a main hall with acoustics so perfect that even she could feel the difference. That's when she first saw him, Blake Wellington. Everyone knew who he was. His family practically owned half the city. His father had donated the money for the new auditorium. His mother was on to the board of directors, and Blake himself was the star of the music program. He had been playing piano since he was 3 years old, had won competitions across the country, and was already being scouted by prestigious music conservatories. He was handsome, confident, and he knew it. Blake was surrounded by friends when Maya walked into advanced music theory class. They all looked expensive, with perfect hair and clothes that probably cost more than Rosa made in a month. Maya found a seat in the front row where she could see the interpreter clearly. She could feel Blake and his friend staring at her, but she kept her eyes on her notebook and tried to ignore them. Mrs. Rodriguez, the music director at Riverside, was different from Mrs. Chen. She was strict and demanding, expecting perfection from every student. But she also believed in Maya. She had seen the recordings of her playing, had read the recommendation letters, and thought Maya deserved a spot in the advanced program. Not everyone agreed with that decision. Over the next few weeks, Maya worked harder than she ever had before. She stayed after school, practicing until the janitors came to lock up. She studied music theory until her eyes burned. She learned to read the visual displays Mrs. Rodriguez had set up for her, showing sound waves and frequencies on a computer screen. Slowly, carefully, she began to improve. Her playing became more nuanced, more controlled, more expressive. Then came the announcement about the regional competition. Every year, Riverside sent one student to represent the school. It was a huge honor, the kind of thing that could open doors to the best music schools in the country. Mrs. Rodriguez would choose the student based on skill, dedication, and artistic interpretation. For weeks, students practiced their showcase pieces, each one hoping to be selected. Blake assumed the spot was his. It always had been. He had represented Riverside for the past 2 years and placed in the top 3 both times. This year was supposed to be his year to win. He practiced a complicated piece by Rachmaninoff, something so technically difficult that most high school students wouldn't even attempt it. He played it flawlessly every single time. But Maya had been working on something different. With Mrs. Rodriguez's help, she had chosen a piece that played to her strengths, something that required not just technical skill but deep emotional understanding. She had modified her approach, using the vibrations and her knowledge of music theory to create an interpretation that was uniquely hers. Mrs. Rodriguez watched her practice one afternoon and got very quiet. Then she smiled and said something through the interpreter that Maya would never forget. "You have something special, something that can't be taught." The day Mrs. Rodriguez announced her decision, the practice room was packed. Every advanced music student waited to hear the name. Maya sat in the back, not expecting anything. She had only been at Riverside for 3 months. There was no way she would be chosen over students who had been there for years. Mrs. Rodriguez stood at the front of the room and explained that the decision had been difficult. Many talented students had auditioned, but one performance had stood out. One student had shown not just technical ability but true artistry. She called Maya's name. The room went silent. Maya thought she had misunderstood. Patricia, her interpreter, was signing frantically with a huge smile on her face. "It's you. You're going to the competition." Maya's hands started shaking. A few students clapped politely. Others looked confused. But Blake's face turned red. His jaw clenched. His friends whispered to each other, shooting looks at Maya. After class, Maya stayed behind to thank Mrs. Rodriguez. She was gathering her music sheets when she felt someone approach. She looked up and saw Blake standing there with 3 of his friends. Their faces weren't friendly. Blake started talking, his mouth moving fast and angry. Patricia stepped forward to interpret, but her hands hesitated. She looked uncomfortable. "What's he saying?" Maya signed. Patricia took a deep breath and began to interpret Blake's words. He was saying that Maya didn't deserve the spot, that she was only chosen because the school wanted to look good, to seem inclusive, that real musicians could hear what they were playing, could make adjustments in real time, could actually appreciate the music they created. His friends nodded along, backing him up. Then Blake said something that made Patricia's face go pale. She hesitated again, not wanting to sign the words. But Maya demanded to know. Patricia's hands moved slowly, carefully forming each sign. "You can't even hear what you're playing. You can't hear, so you can't play. You're making a joke out of music. This spot should go to someone who can actually understand what they're doing." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She had faced discrimination before. She had dealt with people who underestimated her or felt sorry for her. But this was different. This was cruel. Blake wasn't just questioning her ability. He was saying she had no right to even try, that her deafness made her less than, made her unworthy. Maya's eyes filled with tears. Her hands trembled as she clutched her sheet music to her chest. The practice room felt too small, too hot, too suffocating. Other students had stopped to watch. Some looked away, embarrassed. Others watched with interest, waiting to see what Maya would do. But no one defended her. No one told Blake to stop. She couldn't stay there another second. Maya grabbed her bag and rushed out of the room, nearly running down the hallway. Patricia called after her, but Maya didn't stop. She burst through the front doors of the school and kept walking, tears streaming down her face. Her chest felt tight. Her whole body shook. All the confidence she had been building over the past months crumbled in an instant. That evening, Rosa found her daughter sitting on her bed, staring at the wall. Maya's keyboard sat in the corner untouched. When Rosa asked what was wrong, Maya finally broke down. Through tears and sighing, she told her mother everything. What Blake had said, how the other students had just stood there, how maybe he was right. Maybe she was fooling herself. Maybe she had no business competing against hearing musicians who understood music in ways she never could. Rosa listened to everything, her own heart breaking for her daughter. Then she pulled Maya close and held her tight. The next morning, Maya sent an email to Mrs. Rodriguez. She was withdrawing from the competition. She couldn't do it. She wouldn't put herself through that again. Blake could have the spot. He could have the glory. Maya was done trying to prove herself to people who would never accept her. Mrs. Rodriguez read the email 3 times, each time feeling more frustrated. She had seen real talent in Maya, something rare and precious. But she also understood. The world wasn't always kind to people who were different. Sometimes the fight was just too hard. She wrote back saying she understood and that the decision was Maya's to make. But she also wrote something else. She gave Maya the contact information for someone who might be able to help. Someone who had faced the same battles and won. The name was Dr. James Patterson. He was a professor at the state university. And he was deaf. Rosa wasn't the type of mother who let her daughter give up easily. She had raised Maya alone, working double shifts and sacrificing everything to give her child a better life. When she saw her daughter lying in bed at 3 p.m, curtains drawn and eyes empty, she knew something had to change. Rosa picked up her phone and called the number Mrs. Rodriguez had provided. Dr. James Patterson answered on the 3rd ring. The conversation lasted almost an hour. Rosa explained everything. The diagnosis, the bullying, Blake's cruel words, and how Maya had lost the spark that used to make her eyes light up. Dr. Patterson listened without interrupting. When Rosa finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. He told her to bring Maya to his studio that Saturday. He wanted to meet her. More importantly, he wanted to show her something. Maya didn't want to go. She spent Friday night arguing with her mother through sign language, her hands moving fast and angry. What was the point? She had tried and failed. Blake was right. She couldn't compete with hearing musicians. She was fooling herself thinking she ever could. But Rosa was stubborn. Saturday morning, she pulled Maya out of bed, put breakfast in front of her, and told her they were going whether she liked it or not. The drive to the state university took 40 minutes. Maya stared out the window the whole time, watching the city turn into suburbs and then into the sprawling campus with its old brick buildings and massive oak trees. Dr. Patterson's studio was in the music building, down a long hallway covered with posters of past performances and upcoming concerts. Rosa knocked on the door marked with his name. The man who answered was not what Maya expected. Dr. Patterson was in his early 50s, with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a small ponytail. He smiled warmly and gestured for them to come inside. His studio was unlike any music room Maya had ever seen. Yes, there were instruments, a piano, a violin, even a drum set in the corner. But there were also computers with large monitors, strange electronic equipment with blinking lights, and what looked like platforms on the floor that glowed different colors. Dr. Patterson started signing immediately, his hands moving with the fluid grace of someone who had been deaf his entire life. Patricia wasn't there to interpret, but Maya could understand him perfectly. He introduced himself properly, and then did something unexpected. He told them his story. He had been a professional violinist, he explained, one of the best in the state. He played with symphonies, performed at concert halls, and was on track to join a major orchestra. Then at 25 years old, he got sick. A severe infection that the doctors couldn't stop in time. Within weeks, his hearing was gone completely. Everything he had worked for, everything he had built his life around, disappeared in an instant. Maya watched his hands, feeling her throat tighten. She knew that pain, that loss, that feeling of having your entire future ripped away. Dr. Patterson continued signing, his expression serious but not sad. He told them that for months he wanted to die. He couldn't imagine life without music. His career was over. His identity was gone. He sold his violin and spent his days sitting in his apartment, drowning in depression. But then something changed. A former teacher reached out to him and dragged him to a workshop for deaf musicians. Dr. Patterson didn't want to go. He thought it was pointless. How could deaf people make music? It seemed like a cruel joke. But he went anyway, if only to prove that it wouldn't work. What he found there changed his life forever. He discovered a whole community of musicians who were deaf or hard of hearing, drummers who felt rhythms through their bodies, pianists who used visual feedback systems, singers who used special technology to see their pitch. These weren't amateurs or people playing around. They were serious, talented musicians who had simply learned to experience music differently. They taught him that sound was just one way to understand music. There were other ways, better ways in some respects. Dr. Patterson walked over to his piano and gestured for Maya to join him. She hesitated, but Rosa gently pushed her forward. He sat down on the bench and pointed to special lights attached to the piano. When he pressed a key, the lights changed color. Low notes glowed blue. High notes glowed yellow. Middle notes were green. He explained through signs that this was just one tool. There were others. Devices that turned sound into vibrations you could feel. Computer programs that showed you the exact frequency and pitch of every note. Systems that let you see music as patterns and waves. But the most important thing, he signed, was understanding music theory so deeply that you didn't need to hear it to know it. Music wasn't random. It followed rules, patterns, mathematical relationships. Once you understood those principles, you could create and perform music just as well as anyone else. Maybe even better, because you weren't distracted by sound. You could focus purely on the structure, the emotion, the art of it. Maya felt something stir inside her chest. A tiny flame of hope that she thought had been completely extinguished. Dr. Patterson asked her to play something for him. Anything. Maya's hands shook as she placed them on the keys. She started playing a simple piece, one she had memorized years ago. She made mistakes. Her timing was off. Her fingers fumbled. She stopped halfway through, frustrated and embarrassed. Dr. Patterson didn't look disappointed. Instead, he smiled and started signing rapidly. He told her that what she just played showed incredible potential. Yes, there were technical issues, but there was something else there. Emotion. Understanding. A connection to the music that went deeper than just playing notes correctly. He could work with that. He could teach her. Over the next hour, Dr. Patterson showed Maya techniques she had never imagined. He demonstrated how to use vibration platforms that let you feel bass notes through your feet. He showed her visual software that displayed music as flowing patterns, making it easy to see rhythm and timing. He explained how to use muscle memory and spatial awareness to know exactly where your fingers should go. He even had her try on a special vest that translated sound into vibrations across her entire back and chest. But more than the technology, Dr. Patterson taught Maya something more important. He taught her that being deaf didn't make her less of a musician. It made her a different kind of musician. She experienced music in ways that hearing people never would. She understood it on a physical, mathematical, emotional level that most musicians only touch the surface of. That wasn't a weakness. That was a strength. By the time they left the studio 3 hours later, Maya felt like a different person. Dr. Patterson had offered to work with her twice a week, free of charge. He said he saw something special in her, something worth nurturing. But first, he wanted her to make a choice. She could walk away from music, let Blake and people like him win, and spend the rest of her life wondering what might have been. Or she could fight. She could learn, grow, and prove to herself that she belonged on that stage. The drive home was quiet. Rosa kept glancing at her daughter, trying to read her expression. Maya stared out the window, but this time her eyes weren't empty. They were thinking, processing, remembering the feeling of that vibration vest, the colors of those lights, the confident way Dr. Patterson moved through his studio like a man who had conquered his demons and come out stronger. That night, Maya sat at her keyboard for the first time in a week. She didn't play right away. She just sat there, hands resting on the keys, feeling the smooth surface beneath her fingers. She thought about Blake's words. You can't hear, you can't play. Maybe he was right about the first part. She couldn't hear. That was a fact she couldn't change. But the second part? That was wrong. So completely, totally wrong. She started to play, slowly at first, then with more confidence. She made mistakes, but she kept going. She focused on the vibrations, on the patterns, on the way her body moved with the music. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close to perfect. But it was something. It was a beginning. The next morning, Maya sent 2 emails. The first was to Mrs. Rodriguez. She wanted back in the competition. She didn't care what Blake thought or what anyone else thought. She was going to compete. The second email was to Dr. Patterson. She accepted his offer. She was ready to learn, ready to work, ready to become the musician she was meant to be. Mrs. Rodriguez responded within an hour. The spot was still hers if she wanted it. The competition was 3 months away. That was enough time to prepare if Maya was willing to put in the work. Dr. Patterson's response was even simpler. He sent her a practice schedule and a list of exercises to start with. At the bottom, he added one sentence. Welcome back to music, Maya. Now let's show them what you're made of. For the first time since that horrible day with Blake, Maya smiled. A real, genuine smile. She had 3 months to prepare for the biggest performance of her life. 3 months to transform from a girl who had given up into a musician who refused to be silenced. It wouldn't be easy. There would be long nights, frustrating mistakes, and moments when she wanted to quit. But she had something now that she didn't have before. She had hope. And sometimes that's all you need to change everything. The next 3 months became a blur of practice, study, and determination. Maya's life transformed into a rhythm of school, homework, and hours at Dr. Patterson's studio. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, Rosa would drive her to the university where Dr. Patterson put her through intensive training sessions that left her exhausted but exhilarated. He wasn't an easy teacher. He pushed her hard, demanding perfection not in her hearing but in her understanding of every single note she played. Dr. Patterson taught Maya to see music as architecture. Every piece had a structure, a foundation, supporting columns, and decorative elements. She learned to feel the difference between major and minor chords not just through vibration, but through the emotional weight they carried. He showed her how to count measures using visual timers and how to match her breathing to the rhythm of the piece. Most importantly, he taught her to trust herself. At Riverside, things got complicated. Word had spread that Maya was competing after all. Blake and his friends made their displeasure known. They would practice loudly when Maya was trying to work, making exaggerated gestures and laughing among themselves. Blake started telling anyone who would listen that the competition was a joke this year, that Riverside's reputation would be damaged, that real musicians were being overlooked for the sake of political correctness. Mrs. Rodriguez tried to intervene, but there was only so much she could do. She couldn't force students to be kind. She couldn't make Blake accept Maya's right to compete. What she could do was give Maya access to the practice rooms whenever she needed them, and make sure she had every resource available. She even installed one of Dr. Patterson's visual feedback systems on the school's grand piano, so Maya could practice with the same tools she used at the university. Maya tried to ignore the whispers and stares. Shifoku said on her piece, a challenging composition that Dr. Patterson had helped her choose. It was something that would showcase not just technical skill but emotional depth and artistic interpretation. She practiced until her fingers ached, until she could play every measure in her sleep, until the vibrations of each note were burned into her muscle memory. Rosa watched her daughter transform over those months. The sad, defeated girl who had hidden in her room was gone. In her place was a young woman with fire in her eyes and steel in her spine. Rosa was so proud she could barely contain it. She took extra shifts at the diner to save money for a new dress for Maya to wear at the competition. Nothing fancy, but something that would make her daughter feel confident and beautiful on stage. The competition was held at the Grand Beaumont Theater in the heart of downtown. It was a historic building with red velvet seats, golden balconies, and a stage that had hosted legendary performers for over a century. 12 pianists had qualified from schools across the region. The winner would receive a scholarship, recognition, and the chance to perform at the state finals. It was the kind of opportunity that could change a young musician's life. The morning of the competition, Maya woke up at 5. She couldn't sleep. Her stomach was tied in knots. She kept running through the piece in her mind, her fingers twitching as she mentally played each measure. Rosa made her favorite breakfast, but Maya could barely eat. They left the house 2 hours early just to be safe. Rosa held her daughter's hand during the entire drive, squeezing it gently every few minutes as if to say, "I believe in you." Backstage at the Beaumont was chaos. Nervous performers paced back and forth practicing fingering exercises in the air. Parents fussed over their children's clothes and hair. Teachers gave last-minute advice and encouragement. Maya found a quiet corner and tried to center herself the way Dr. Patterson had taught her. Breathe, focus, remember why you're here. The interpreter assigned to the competition, a woman named Linda, introduced herself and explained how the day would work. Blake arrived an hour before his performance time, surrounded by his parents and friends. His father wore an expensive suit and talked loudly about Blake's chances of winning. His mother kept adjusting Blake's bow tie and telling him how proud she was. Blake himself looked calm and confident, like someone who had never doubted his place in the world. When he saw Maya sitting alone in her corner, he smirked but said nothing. He didn't need to. His expression said it all. The competition began at 10 in the morning. A panel of 5 judges sat in the front row, clipboards and score sheets ready. The theater was packed with parents, teachers, students, and music lovers from the community. Maya peeked through the stage curtains and felt her heart race. There were hundreds of people out there. All of them would be watching her, judging her. Some of them probably agreeing with Blake that she had no business being there. The first few performers were good, really good. A girl from Eastside Academy played Chopin with incredible precision. A boy from St. Michael's performed a modern piece that had the audience nodding in appreciation. Each performance raised the bar higher. Maya's confidence began to waver. These were serious musicians with years of training. What was she thinking? How could she possibly compete with them? Then Blake's name was called. He walked onto the stage with the easy confidence of someone who owned the room. He sat at the grand piano, adjusted the bench, and placed his hands on the keys. Then he began to play. His piece was Rachmaninoff, incredibly difficult and complex, and he played it flawlessly. Every note was perfect. Every dynamic was precise. His fingers flew across the keys with practiced ease. The audience was mesmerized. When Blake finished, the applause was thunderous. People stood up. The judges nodded to each other with impressed expressions. Blake took his bow with a slight smile, soaking in the adoration. As he walked off stage, he passed Maya in the wings. He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. His eyes said, "Try to beat that." Maya felt her hands start to shake. How could she follow that performance? Blake had been perfect. Absolutely perfect. She thought about running. Just leaving through the back door and never looking back. No one would blame her. She had tried. That was enough, wasn't it? But then she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Dr. Patterson standing there. He had come to watch, sitting in the back row where Maya hadn't noticed him. He started signing, his movements calm and steady. He reminded her that this wasn't about Blake. It wasn't about being perfect or proving anything to anyone else. This was about her and the music, about showing the world what she had learned, about honoring the art form she loved. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared on her other side. Linda, the interpreter, was there too, and Rosa, who had somehow made her way backstage and was looking at her daughter with tears already forming in her eyes. Maya was surrounded by people who believed in her, people who had fought for her, people who knew she belonged on that stage just as much as Blake or anyone else. The stage manager called her name. Maya Lopez, Riverside Academy. It was time. Maya took a deep breath and walked toward the stage entrance. Her legs felt like they might give out. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. But she kept walking, one foot in front of the other, through the curtains, into the bright lights. The theater seemed even bigger from the stage. All those faces looking up at her, the judges with their pens ready, the audience waiting to see what the deaf girl could do. Maya could feel their doubt, their curiosity, their skepticism. She walked to the piano and sat down on the bench. The same bench where Blake had just performed his flawless piece. Maya closed her eyes for a moment. She thought about her journey, the diagnosis that had shattered her world, the months of silence and isolation, Blake's cruel words, Dr. Patterson's studio, her mother's unwavering support, every practice session, every frustration, every small victory. It all led to this moment. She placed her hands on the keys. The cool, smooth surface felt familiar beneath her fingers, like coming home. She opened her eyes and looked at the piano, at her hands, at the keys that would tell her story. She had chosen to play Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, but with her own modifications, her own interpretation, a piece by another deaf composer, transformed by her unique understanding of music. The theater fell completely silent, everyone waiting. Maya took one more breath, and then she began to play. The first notes flowed from Maya's fingers like water, soft, gentle. The opening of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata was meant to feel like moonlight itself, quiet and mysterious. Maya couldn't hear the notes, but she felt them. The vibrations traveled through the bench, through her body, through her very bones. She had played this piece hundreds of times in the past 3 months. She knew every measure, every pause, every subtle shift in dynamics. But this wasn't just Beethoven's composition. Maya had done something bold, something that made Mrs. Rodriguez nervous and Dr. Patterson proud. She had woven her own variations into the classical piece, modern elements that transformed it into something entirely new. It was risky. The judges might hate it. They might see it as disrespectful to a masterpiece, or they might see it as brilliant. As Maya moved into the second movement, her fingers began to dance faster across the keys. This was where her modifications became more obvious. She added unexpected chord progressions that Beethoven never wrote. She created moments of tension and release that made the piece feel urgent and alive. Her body swayed slightly with the rhythm, not because she could hear it, but because she felt it in every cell. The audience sat frozen. This wasn't what they expected. They had come thinking they might witness a brave attempt, a feel-good story about overcoming obstacles. Instead, they were experiencing something extraordinary. Maya wasn't just playing notes correctly. She was telling a story. Her story. About loss and pain and the determination to rise above it. About finding beauty in silence. About refusing to let the world tell you what you can't do. In the front row, the judges leaned forward in their seats. Their pens hovered over their score sheets, but they weren't writing. They were too captivated to look away. This was the kind of performance that reminded them why they had fallen in love with music in the first place. Technical skill was important, yes. But this went beyond technique. This was art in its purest form. Maya's hands moved with absolute confidence now. All her fear had melted away. She wasn't thinking about Blake or the audience or winning. She was lost in the music, in the vibrations, in the mathematical beauty of the composition. Every note was exactly where it needed to be. Not because she could hear it, but because she understood it on a level that transcended sound. The third movement was the most challenging part. Fast, intense, demanding incredible finger coordination and stamina. Maya had practiced this section until her hands cramped. Dr. Patterson had made her play it over and over, focusing on muscle memory and spatial awareness. Now all that training paid off. Her fingers flew across the keys with precision and power. The piece built to a crescendo, emotion pouring out of every chord. Backstage, Dr. Patterson watched on a monitor with tears running down his face. He saw himself in Maya, saw the young musician he used to be before he lost his hearing, but he also saw something he had never been. Maya had a gift that went beyond anything he had achieved. She had taken her limitation and transformed it into a unique perspective. She wasn't trying to play like a hearing person. She was playing like Maya. And it was magnificent. Rosa sat in the audience with her hands pressed to her mouth, trying not to sob. She thought about all the nights she had worked late, missing dinner with her daughter to pay for lessons and equipment. She thought about the doctor's appointments and the hearing aids that hadn't worked and the tears they had both cried. Every sacrifice, every struggle, every moment of doubt led to this. Her baby girl was on that stage proving to the world what Rosa had always known. Maya was extraordinary. Mrs. Rodriguez stood in the wings, her professional composure completely shattered. She had taught music for 20 years and had seen countless talented students. But this was different. This was the kind of performance that happened once in a career. She made a mental note to call every contact she had at prestigious music schools. Maya needed to be at a conservatory, studying with the best teachers in the country. This much talent couldn't be wasted. Even Blake, standing in the back with his arms crossed, felt something shift inside him. He had spent months mocking Maya, convinced that she was a fraud who didn't deserve to be there. But watching her play, he couldn't deny what was right in front of him. She was good. Really good. Maybe better than him. The realization stung his pride, but somewhere beneath the jealousy he felt something else. Respect and shame for how he had treated her. Maya reached the final section of the piece. This was her favorite part, the modifications she was most proud of. She had taken Beethoven's ending and reimagined it, adding layers of complexity and emotion that made it feel both ancient and modern at the same time. Her hands moved across the keys with a gentleness that contrasted with the intensity of the previous section. It was like watching a storm calm into a peaceful sunrise. The last note hung in the air. Maya kept her hands on the keys for a moment longer, feeling the vibration fade slowly into nothing. Then she lifted her fingers and placed them in her lap. She opened her eyes and looked out at the audience for the first time since she started playing. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The theater was completely silent. Maya's heart sank. Had she made a mistake? Had her modifications been too much? Had she embarrassed herself in the school? She started to stand up, ready to leave the stage in humiliation, but then she saw it. People rising from their seats. First one person, then another, then entire rows. Within seconds, the entire theater was on its feet. Hands were clapping. Mouths were open in amazement. Some people were wiping tears from their eyes. Maya couldn't hear the applause, but she could feel it. The vibrations of hundreds of hands coming together created a physical sensation that washed over her like a wave. She could see the emotion on people's faces, joy, awe, appreciation. She had done it. She had actually done it. A smile spread across her face so wide it almost hurt. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. The judges themselves were standing, applauding along with everyone else. Maya took her bow, her eyes searching the crowd until she found Rosa. Her mother was crying and clapping, so proud she looked like she might burst. Next to her, Dr. Patterson was signing "Amazing. You were amazing." Mrs. Rodriguez was backstage jumping up and down like a teenager at a concert. When Maya finally left the stage, she was immediately surrounded. Linda, the interpreter, could barely keep up with all the people trying to talk to her at once. Judges wanted to meet her. Other performers wanted to congratulate her. Even some of Blake's friends approached looking sheepish and impressed. Maya answered questions, shook hands, and tried to process what had just happened. It all felt like a dream. The wait for the results felt like an eternity. All 12 performers stood on stage while the judges deliberated. Maya held Rosa's hand tightly. She told herself that winning didn't matter. She had already won by simply making it through the performance. But deep down she wanted it. She wanted validation. She wanted proof that she belonged here. The head judge, an elderly woman who had taught at Juilliard for 30 years, stepped up to the microphone. She talked about the exceptional talent they had witnessed today. She praised all the performers. Then she announced the third-place winner. Not Maya, second place. A boy from Westfield Academy who had played beautifully. Still not Maya. Maya's heart pounded. Either she had won, or she hadn't placed at all. The judge smiled and looked directly at Maya. She announced that first place, by unanimous decision of all 5 judges, went to Maya Lopez from Riverside Academy. The crowd erupted again. Rosa screamed and threw her arms around her daughter. Dr. Patterson rushed the stage, signing so fast Maya could barely understand him. Mrs. Rodriguez was crying openly now, not caring who saw. Maya walked forward to accept her trophy and scholarship certificate. The head judge pulled her aside and said something through Linda. She said that in 40 years of judging competitions, she had rarely seen anything like Maya's performance. It wasn't just technically excellent. It was transformative. It reminded her why music mattered. She encouraged Maya to pursue this seriously, to apply to the best schools, to never let anyone make her feel like she didn't belong. Blake was standing off to the side. When Maya caught his eye, he did something she didn't expect. He started walking toward her. Maya tensed, ready for another cruel comment. But instead, Blake signed 2 words. He had clearly practiced them, his movements awkward but sincere. "I'm sorry." Then he said something else through Linda. He told Maya that her performance was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard, that he had been wrong about everything, that she had taught him something important about music and about himself. Maya didn't know what to say. She simply nodded, accepting his apology with grace she didn't know she possessed. Blake extended his hand. Maya shook it. The rivalry was over. In its place was mutual respect and maybe eventually friendship. The celebration continued long after the official ceremony ended. Maya did interviews with local news stations. Her photo was taken dozens of times. Other deaf students and their parents sought her out, telling her how much her performance meant to them. She had become a symbol of possibility, proof that limitations only exist if you accept them. That night, back home in their small apartment, Maya sat at her old keyboard with the sticky keys. The trophy sat on her desk, gleaming in the lamplight. Rosa was in the kitchen making her daughter's favorite meal. Everything felt different now. The world had opened up in ways Maya never imagined possible. She thought about Dr. Patterson's words from months ago. Music wasn't just something you heard with your ears. It lived in your heart, in your understanding, in your soul. Maya had proven that truth not just to others, but to herself. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play, not for an audience or judges, but simply because she loved it. The music flowed through her, vibrations transforming into emotion, silence becoming a canvas for something beautiful. Maya smiled. This was only the beginning.